had this idea of, shouldn't I hate this suicide bomber for killing my mother? Shouldn't I? He was also actually recruited by Hamas, so I know what Hamas terror means.
Yeah.
Firsthand, I know it.
Yeah.
And then my next question was, shouldn't I hate his family for this? So that's the idea behind the documentary. And I guess I'm still asking myself that question. Why don't I hate? Shouldn't I hate?
On this episode of Kalam Khasa, a Kalam podcast feature, we're going to hear from Bernt Hermele, who recently opened a museum exhibition at Medelhavsmuseet in Stockholm about the Nakba, when 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced as the State of Israel was created. Before Bernt began working with this exhibition, he wrote a book with a collection of eyewitness testimonies from Nakba survivors, which he synthesized from his Nakba podcast. Before that, he produced a similar body of work about Holocaust survivors, including a podcast and a book. But before he began working on documenting the Holocaust and the Nakba, Bernt Hermele was a business reporter investigating corporate corruption. But then something tragic happened, which changed the trajectory of his life. His mother, who was living in Israel at the time, was killed in a terrorist attack during the Second Intifada in 2002. More than 20 years later and countless trips throughout the Middle East and Europe, Bernt's work has produced invaluable documentation. I recommend anyone in Stockholm to visit the museum exhibition Nakba at Medelhavsmuseet. Now, without further ado, here's Bernt Hermele.
إلى خبز أمي وقهوتي ولمسة أمي أحن إلى خبز أمي وقهوتي ولمسة أمي وتكبر في الطفولة يوما على صدري.
Bernt Hermele is a Swedish-Jewish journalist and author who just opened an exhibition on the Palestinian Nakba at Medelhavsmuseet in Stockholm. Bernt, thank you for this important documentation and welcome to the Kalam podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Bernt, you've had various positions at different news outlets during your career in both print and radio and TV. And then in 2017, you started the podcast Överlevarna, which means survivors in Swedish. And this was about Holocaust survivors. And then you kind of synthesized that into a book. And then in 2020, you began working on the Nakba podcast about the Palestinian catastrophe, which also became a book and now is a museum exhibition. And I wanted to start by asking you, how much do you think the Holocaust and the Nakba are interlinked?
Not really at all, but for me, I'm the connection, not the historical. It's violence, of course. There are similarities, but the only connection is me.
Okay, and why did you decide to? Were you kind of inspired by your previous work on the Holocaust to do the Nakba?
Not really. The podcast for the survivors was, I'm good at getting ideas from other people. That's how things work for me. So that was an idea from my wife, and she set me on that track. The next project, the Nakba project, was an idea from a friend, Karsten Inde, who said, why don't you do a Nakba project? So I did. So no. I sort of weigh the ideas, of course. I don't do everything that people suggest, but these were two good ideas and I did them.
Yeah. So what does the Nakba mean to you? What is it when you think about it?
Well, first of all, when I started out, I was not that knowledgeable about it. I was curious about it for several years. And then when my friend Karsten said, why don't you do the same thing as the survivor Nakba, do the Nakba? I understood I could do that. But for me, it was more of a historical thing than an ongoing thing. So that was one of the first things that I, talking to people like you and I do. Hopefully you will learn something from this conversation, we'll see. But I learn a lot from talking to people. And so one of the first talks I had with an older woman, I think it was in Jordan, perhaps Amman, And I told her very, tell me about what you know about the Nakba 48. Only what you saw, only what you know, no second stuff, just your... So she answers, what Nakba are you talking about? And immediately I thought, this woman is too old to I already lost the chance for a conversation. So I asked her, what do you mean? No, do you mean the 48? Do you mean 56? Do you mean 67? Do you mean the Intifada, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? So there and then I immediately learned a new thing. But the connection with the word Nakba is an ongoing thing. So that's what I've been taught by other people. It's ongoing, obviously.
Yeah. So how does how do you position that in? I mean, I've read the book but I've not yet been to the museum exhibition. How do you portray that ongoing nature in the museum exhibition?
The museum exhibition is more of a historical presentation from, let's say, 47 to 49. But some of the stories stretch, and the photos we show are archive photos from historical events. But there are 11 stories from the book that actors read out loud, that they recorded with actors. And they go maybe not up till exactly this date, but to the present. So, but the emphasis is on, and I think, it's a museum, first of all, and I think it becomes less, how should I say, controversial, or maybe more meaningful to people to get the context. History at its best gives you a context, and then you can start figuring it out yourself, so.
Yeah. It's
basically an historical exhibition. It has some 20 stuff exhibited, like a key, of course, and the last color photo of a villa in Haifa before they were thrown out, and so on and so forth. So it's a very quiet little exhibition. It's a small room, and which I like, because it's sort of a presentation of the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. The feeling of being trapped. It's almost like you go into a very, very confined space. So yeah.
So you mentioned controversy, and you and I have been communicating in the past few days and weeks about the reception of both your work and my work, and I want you to tell us about how the book and the museum exhibition has been received so far.
I think the way I view it, it's meaningful for people. Yeah. So people been waiting in Sweden, why doesn't anyone talk about the Nakba with everything's going on now in Gaza and the West Bank and inside Israel, outside it. So I think people have been waiting for this. So they say, finally, someone is addressing this question. So I guess it's meaningful for a lot of people.
But we've also obviously experienced criticism. And what does that look like?
Yeah, the Jewish Central Road, I don't know. It's a body that consists of the 3 Jewish communities in Sweden, Stockholm, Gothenburg and Malmö. It's not a big deal. The only thing is I'm surprised they criticized the exhibition from the standpoint of a press release that the museum sent out, and they didn't even bother visit the exhibition. I think that's kind of strange.
Yeah.
Guys, why don't you go and look at the stuff, and then you can have an opinion, so. It's low key for me.
Yeah.
It's low key. I'm not. First of all, I'm not addressed personally. It's towards this
Right.
museum. That's state museum or whatever you call it. But I'm surprised that they don't take the time. If this is serious business for them, I think they should go see the exhibition first.
Yeah.
So
Do you think, I mean, isn't it a lot kind of being a bit anxious about the picture that many people have, and many more people are getting of what Israel is?
I don't know. I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
It's not for me to think about. I'm thinking about the exhibition. I'm thinking about all the people that I met that shared their stories. And now I'm thinking about the exhibition, you know. I couldn't, you know, I'm not bothered.
That's good. So
what can I do about it? You know, I can only waste time. It's a waste of time, and I try to concentrate on my own time and what I can do with myself and my feelings and my thoughts and my work. That's the only thing I can influence, if anything. You know, so that's what I'm occupied with. I'm basically occupied with myself. Basically, and it's a full-time job, you know.
Yeah. It's not easy. It's not easy.
Nah, it's not easy. It doesn't go well all the time, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
And it's meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the answer to that.
Yeah, of course. So you mentioned one of the stories, or one of the women that you met when you were doing the interviews for the Nakba, and that was kind of a light bulb moment for you when you realized, like, okay, wow, this is ongoing. Can you tell us a bit about other things that you didn't know? I mean, obviously, with the
how much time do we have, Edgar? One of the super interesting thing for me was how these people were talking about Jews, because I'm Jewish. You presented me as a Jewish author. I'm not terribly keen on being presented like that, because I'm a Swedish author and the rest isn't that interesting for me, but that's, I mean, I don't mind. I am a Jew. I was born by Jewish parents. So anyways, these people started talking about Jews and dividing them in an interesting way. They were talking about, the national Jews. I didn't understand what that meant. Or the Palestine Jews, and they had a third expression, I don't remember that exactly right now, national. Anyway, those are expressions of what you could call good neighbors, people, Jews that were born in Palestine, okay?
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you had the European Jews perhaps, or the East European Jews, or the Zionist Jews, that came to Palestine. So that was an eye-opener for me, that, you know, Jews aren't... I mean, it's like in Sweden, not all Jews agree or have the same background. I mean, we have different class backgrounds, economic, social, and so on and so forth. So that was really interesting for me.
Yeah. Did you speak with any Palestinian Jews or descendants of Palestinian Jews?
No, it wasn't part of the project at all.
Yeah.
Maybe I did, but not as in the form of interview, no.
Yeah. How many people did you speak to in total?
75, 76. It's about half of them are living in Sweden, and half in West Bank, Jordan, Amman, and Beirut, Lebanon, and some in, I guess you call it Israel proper. I don't know if it's the right... Yeah, something like that.
Historic Palestine, Israel proper.
Yeah, historic Palestine, if you will. Yeah, that's fine with me. And the interesting thing for me is to talk to different people, you know. And with different people, I mean men and women, upper class, lower class, educated, peasants, or even poor people, of course. People living in camps, in a shitty room with no really sink or kitchen or anything. I was sitting with a woman. She heated her tea on element. What's that in English? Heater.
On a heater, yeah.
Yeah, whatever it's. I mean, not a heater for the.
No, a heater for heating up the room.
Yeah, for the heat. Yeah. So she was really poor, and she was with she was married. Her husband was, I think, 35 years older than she was. She had a good marriage, but they didn't have kids, so she regretted that she was alone. And on the other hand, we were in both in Amman and Khalil and Jericho. Super rich people, super educated, super connected people, and but the pain is all over, of course.
Yeah. Did you notice any difference between between different classes when it came to speaking and how they spoke about the Nakba?
Yeah, of course, you have different references. Some, first of all, the upper classes were speaking English generally, so that's a big difference.
Yeah.
So I could speak like we do. When it's Arabic and you have an interpreter, there will be a lot of misunderstandings. You know, I'm asking the question to the interpreter. He or she misunderstands it, puts it to the person that's going to answer, and there are new misunderstandings and so on. So that a lot of time goes to clearing out just, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
And sometimes I have an interpreter that says, sometimes I ask some of the women, were you raped? Then the interpreter says, I don't think that's, you shouldn't put that, that's not okay, You started discussing things and so on and so forth. So of course, but when it comes to trauma, when it comes to smartness, it's not divided like that. Some people are very smart all over, and some people are not that smart, in my opinion, or it's not such a meaningful conversation. And the trauma, I think that's a connection. You started asking me about the connection between the Holocaust and the Nakba. That's the connection, that people are traumatized, and usually in generations, on a DNA level, on a basic level, things are carried on and carried on and carried on. That I could see. Yeah. There's no big difference. And people, rich or poor, Jews or Palestinians or Arabs or whatever, they cry for the same reasons. They have nightmares for the same reasons. They wake up trying to get out of the bed for the same reasons. So,
is there a conversation that keeps you up at night, that kind of haunts you a little bit?
Not really. I get a bit hyper when I'm working on a big project and it's finished, like this exhibition, so I don't sleep that good at night. But that's just me. It's not. Yeah. It's not the voices,
Yeah. How was the if you compare the experiences of doing the survivors, about the Holocaust survivors, and doing this project? Did you experience any similar themes, or did you work in different ways?
My knowledge was a bit. I knew a little bit more about the Holocaust, not that greatly more, or whatever you say, but I knew some of the people, and that was a big difference. And we spoke Swedish to each other.
Yeah.
I had one woman actually. She wasn't demented, but she was close to it. I think she was 95. She started out speaking Yiddish with me.
Okay. Do you speak Yiddish?
No. So as soon as we can't do this in Yiddish because I don't get what you're saying. Yeah. And she continued, and she continued, and she continued, and finally I got her to switch over to Swedish. So we had a conversation. I could have had an interpreter, of course, but I wasn't ready for that. But at the end, lots of people, when you do long talks for 1 hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, the longest was 7 hours actually.
Wow.
Yeah, they get into a what do you say? Flow of conscience. Yeah,
stream of consciousness.
Exactly. They get into their own stream, and they start talking by themselves.
Wow.
Right, which is the best part of the conversation for me, because then I just listen and hum a little bit, And then she at the end switched back to Yiddish.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
but that was like the song of the whales, you know. It's just
Wow.
she went on, and that didn't really happen with the Palestinian conversations because I wasn't. Maybe with some of the Swedish speaking, yes, but it's different when you have an interpreter. You don't get that connection that we get when we speak the same language. But what was your question, by the way? I don't remember.
If working on the Holocaust and working on the Nakba had any, both like in terms of your own like sort of spiritual, I don't know, experience, but also methodologically.
Methodological? What did you say?
Yeah, like metoden, like.
The method is different because.
Yeah.
The situation is so different, you know. All the Holocaust interviews, we did it mostly in Sweden, some in Denmark, some in Norway, and some in Israel, or historic Palestine, if you prefer. And they weren't poor people, any of them. I mean, not poor, they weren't living in refugee camps, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference.
Yeah.
You know, the room, the vibe in the room, I mean, that's huge difference.
Yeah. Were you aware of the situation for Palestinian refugees in refugee camps, what's called refugee camps, which essentially today is slum areas in Lebanon, for example?
Exactly.
Were you aware of that? Did it surprise you when you went?
Yeah, I was aware of it on a theoretical basis. I've seen the pictures, I've read some stories, but when you go to a person, I mean, that's the weakness with our conversation. We're not sitting in the same room, right? Because that means something. You know, when you come into a room, you see what kind of cup the person is drinking, the coffee or the tea. You know, all of those things matter for a conversation. I'm not criticizing what we're doing. I'm just telling you this is.
I agree. I know.
Yeah, this isn't. It was completely different experience being on the ground. Of course, that's the whole. That's the beauty of doing these kind of things, that you have to go and sit with people. You know, maybe it's a very nice sofa, maybe it's on the floor. You know, all of these things inspires you and affects you and everything. Yeah. So it was. You know, I thought of camps. What is a camp? But it's, like you say, it's a slum city. It could be in Brazil or wherever, you know.
Yeah.
I haven't gone there, but I imagine. Yeah, so it had a huge impact on me. I mean, not that I was scared or anything, or I wasn't particularly depressed by it. It was just interesting.
Yeah, sure. So, did you ever experience anyone being apprehensive to doing this? Partly because you're like from the West, but also obviously because you're Jewish.
Well, Edgar, first of all, I didn't present myself as a Jew, necessarily. I presented myself, maybe, you know, I usually used fixers that helped me connect. I tried to get some names and leads, and I did, and I got some, but at the end of the day, you need someone that knows people. Yeah. It's a strength and it's a weakness, because he or she takes you to people that already have been interviewed a lot sometimes, and that's not so interesting for me, because they are on a track, and they start at A and they end at Z, and they get sort of annoyed by questions that try to take them somewhere else.
Sure.
But I work with those. So they had the clearance already. I didn't go into the situation saying, "Hey, I'm a Swedish Jew, nice to meet you." But sometimes it was brought up by me. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I understood a bit of Arabic, like if they said arba, which is 4, I guess, and it's arba in Hebrew. And then I maybe echoed that arba, but in a more Hebrew dialect.
Yeah.
So immediately, "Oh, are you Jewish?" "Yeah, I'm Jewish." Yeah. So it happened. And sometimes No, so they had already said okay.
Yeah.
It was sort of too late for them to back out.
Yeah.
But I didn't make a point of it. If they would have slammed the door and said no Jews in this house, yeah, okay, why not? But it didn't happen.
Yeah. So you've also in the past you've made a documentary about the tragic death of your mother, who was killed in a terrorist attack in Israel during the Second Intifada.
Yeah.
And
2002.
yeah, 2002. And I think many people maybe who are not familiar with your work, who just know this information, would be surprised that you would go on to spend so much time trying to document the suffering of Palestinians.
Aha, okay, yeah. What can I say? I try to document my own suffering. That's what I'm doing.
Really? Is it your own suffering? I mean, I guess that's interconnected.
Yeah, to come to terms of these kind of senseless actions, you know. There were 30 people killed in the so-called Passover massacre in Netanya. Well, 31 actually, including the suicide bomber.
Right,
It was all, so it's 31 people dead. He killed 30 and he killed himself. Well, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Well, some are surprised, some think it's interesting, some doesn't care, some are angry, some thinks it's meaningful. I'm just trying to, you know, I had this, when I did the documentary, it was broadcasted 2005 in TV4 in Sweden. And actually sold only to one more country, Switzerland, also a neutral country. That's kind of interesting.
That is interesting. Wow.
Yeah. All the others said, we know these suicide bomber stories, Israel or America or whatever. But Switzerland thought it was interesting. Anyway, I had this idea of, you know, shouldn't I hate this suicide bomber for killing my mother? Shouldn't I? He was also actually recruited by Hamas, so I know what Hamas terror means.
Yeah.
Firsthand, I know it.
Yeah.
And then my next question was, shouldn't I hate his family for this? So that's the idea behind the documentary. And I guess I'm still asking myself that question. Why don't I hate? Shouldn't I hate?
You feel like you don't hate?
I don't. I can't. It's not in me. And I don't know why. I know some people hate, and I guess they don't know why they hate. And some people don't, and we ask ourselves, why don't we hate? You know, it's not obvious. It's not an obvious, and I'm not sure it's even a choice. Maybe it is. I don't know. I haven't figured that one out. So as long as I have that question, I keep on going. You know.
Yeah, sure.
Why don't I hate?
Yeah, it's an interesting question to ask.
Yeah. Why shouldn't I hate? Because of my mother.
Yeah.
The killing of my mother. I mean, it's reasonable.
It is, yeah, of course.
Yeah, but I don't.
People hate for less.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, for a football game.
Sure,
yeah, you can hate for nothing at all. You can hate.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You've spent a great deal of your grown-up life dealing with some of the, just if we just take the Holocaust and the Nakba, some of the darkest chapters in modern history, that you can't get away from it. These are the two events that are still affecting us in modern society. True. Especially what's happening in Gaza today. Why have you dedicated so many years to these dark chapters?
I don't know. I don't know. And you have to remember, Edgar, I'm old. I'm 70 years old, soon 71. So this is just the past 15 years for me.
Okay.
Okay, you have to put it in perspective.
Sure, that's okay. I'll
or 20. Okay, let's say the past 22 years, starting with the killing of my mother. Yeah. So 22 out of 71. You know.
So that's kind of where it started.
Yeah.
Before then.
I was a business journalist. I made life miserable for a lot of executives investigating stuff. Yeah. So now I turned that urge towards myself instead. And I found that much more meaningful for myself, and hopefully for some others.
When you say the urge, you're working for Veckans Affärer, and you're investigating, shitty, like corrupt business.
Exactly. And Dagens Industry before that, and a lot of paper. I did that for a longer time.
Sure. Yeah. No, I get that. The perspective is different. But if you, so you're saying that you turned that investigative impulse on yourself, trying to investigate who I am and being curious what my motives are. I have this facade of being a very nice guy, but maybe I'm not, and so on. You have to figure this. Could you present your findings, please?
Yeah, it's in my work.
Yeah.
I have to take care of my. I wrote 6 books or whatever, and 2 podcasts and 2 documentaries actually. I did also about a Swedish singer who died in cancer, Totta Näslund. So that's connected actually to the documentary about my mother. But it's a work in progress.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll take it.
Yeah. That's the best answer I can give you.
No, that's fine. I think it's a truthful answer, to be honest.
Yeah.
I noticed that you said you'd interviewed 75 or 76 people. Is that a coincidence, or is that something? Because it's been 75 to 76 years since.
No, it's a coincidence. It's the sign of the gods or something.
Divine intervention.
That one I didn't think of. You see, that's a lot of stuff to keep on thinking about and analyzing. Exactly. Good point.
Well, thank you so much, Bernt Hermele, for speaking to me today. I think this will be hopefully one of many conversations, and we are both in touch with Medelhavsmuseet, and hopefully we're going to do a live podcast.
That would be great.
At there in June. So in the show notes I'm going to put a link to the exhibition and to your podcasts and stuff like that, so people can check that out. And then hopefully we'll next time we'll be in the same room, and
that would be great. Yeah, not at home at your or mine home, but still it's better at the Medelhavsmuseum.
I think so too.
So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Bernt, and thank you for your work. I look forward to going to the exhibition when I'm back in Sweden.
إلى خبز أمي وقهوتي ولمسة أمي أحن إلى خبز أمي وقهوتي ولمسة أمي وتكبر في الطفولة يوما.
That was all from Kalam Khasa, a Kalam podcast feature. For more information, check out our Instagram at Kalam Podcast. Until Thursday, that's all from us.
يوما على صدري يومي وأعشق عمري لأني إذا مت أخجل من دمعي أمي.